resolves itself.
Have you been there?
Could be. Is there a pause on there or drop? I guess so. Live. Pause? Yeah.
Good morning, everyone.
Okay.
Everybody would
Good.
come gather around at a time, singing praises to our God and King. Enjoy. Everybody stand up and join in with us this morning. So would you all please rise? Okay, good morning, everyone. Let's open in a word of prayer. Father God, we thank you for this glorious morning that you provided. We thank you, Father, that you have set a great example for us as your people to apply to our children. So bless the fathers here today, Lord. Give us wisdom, give us guidance, help us to love our children the way that you love us. We ask that you would bless our time together this morning, and if any others are on their way, we'd ask that you would bring them safely this morning. And we give all the praises and all the glory to you, and we ask these things in Jesus' name. And everyone said? Amen.
And lovely is your dwelling place, O Lord Almighty. Oh, my soul longs and even waits for you. Oh, hear my heart is satisfied within your presence. I sing beneath the shadow of your wings. Better is one day in your courts, better is one day in your house, better is one day in your courts than thousands elsewhere. Better is one day in your courts, better is one day in your house, better is one day in your courts than thousands elsewhere. Thousands elsewhere. Thousands elsewhere. One thing I ask, and I would seek to see your beauty, to find you in the place your glory dwells. One thing I ask, and I would seek to see your beauty, to find you in the place your glory dwells. Better is one day in your courts, better is one day in your house, better is one day in your courts than thousands elsewhere. Better is one day in your courts, better is one day in your house, better is one day in your courts than thousands elsewhere. My heart and flesh cry out for you, the living God. Your spirit's water to my soul. I've tasted and I've seen. Come once again to me. I will draw near to you. I will draw near to you. There is one day in your courts, there is one day in your house, there is one day in your courts, thousands of rising, eyes are turning to you. We turn to you. Hope is stirring, hearts are yearning for you. We long for you. Just when we see you, we find strength to face the day. In your presence, all our fears are washed away, washed away. Open the eyes of my heart, Lord. Open the eyes of my heart. I want to see you. I want to see you. Open the eyes of my heart, Lord. Open the eyes of my heart. I want to see you. You're my one defense, my righteousness. Oh God, how I need you.
God, this morning we just thank you that while we need you, while we desire you, while we can't live without you, Lord, you'll always be there for us. Lord, I pray that our needs for you will be met this morning. Lord, thank you for being with us during this service. Thank you for leading us through worship. Lord, I just pray that your hand would be upon us as we go forward, and that your spirit would lead us and guide us. Lord, thank you again for this time this morning. Do it all to honor you in your name. In the name of Jesus we pray. Amen. Good morning, everybody. Welcome again. Let's greet each other. Good morning, everybody.
I'm doing very good. I guess I sleep at night. Tell me.
I don't know.
Me.
Because we're
Which one's from out of town?
we're talking about. It's pretty much after service.
All right, welcome again, everybody. Hear me okay? Yep. Before we get started, give me a temperature check. Anybody too hot, too cold?
Just really good.
We're good?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Must just be me that's sweating then. Okay. Well, welcome again. Thank you all for being here. I think most of you probably know Pastor Brian's in California, having a little vacation time, Southern California. So seeing his wife, Julie, Julie's mom and dad, and Nina's cousin. So I imagine they might be watching us right now, so be on your good behavior. This isn't like the substitute teachers here, so y'all can act up. He'll be watching. So, but I would just ask you to continue to pray that he has a good restful time away and just a good time with his family. So before we start teaching, in your bulletins, if you got one this morning, just a few things to remind you of. The midweek study is going to resume on June 29th. Thursday, June 23rd, which is coming up this week, women's prayer will be meeting at Pastor Brian's house in Franklin. I'm sorry, it says resumes June 23rd. And they have that. It starts the 30th. It's not going to be, okay. So it's actually in 2 weeks. Sorry about that. She'll still be gone, so women's prayer will be in a couple of weeks. Men's prayer will be the following for Friday the 24th at 6:30 at Pastor Brian's house. And coming up later in July, July 14th through 17th, the Deep South Youth Conference. For any of the young folks who'd like to be a part of that, please see Pastor Justin. And October 20th through 21st, ways down the line, but there'll be a couples retreat at Camp Garners Creek in Dixon. Cost is $160 per couple. It includes room, night, buffet, dinner, and breakfast. You can find out more about the facility at garnercreek.com. There'll be more info to follow. All right. That said, I want to invite you all to open with me to Revelation chapter 3. as we teach this morning, I want to start with this question. I want you to think about it. Oh, thank you. Does anybody need a Bible this morning? Everybody's good? Fully armed? Okay. So Revelation chapter 3. And the question I want you to think about as we teach this morning is this one. And that is, who loves you more than a brother? So just keep that question in mind as we go. Whenever Justin or I get the chance to teach when Brian's not here, we always joke about, so what are you going to teach on? And the question is always, well, I think I'll do the entire book of Revelation or the entire book of Isaiah, because as all of you who are students know that there's just a lot of information in those books. It's a little bit intimidating. There's prophetic things, there's things that happened in the past, there's things that haven't happened yet. There's just a lot going on, so we always joke about taking on something as challenging as Revelation. I'm going to do my best with it this morning, Revelation chapter 3, go through it as a study, and then there's some things we can learn from it at the end. So I imagine a lot of you are familiar with this book, but just a little bit of background. The author of Revelation is John, the same man who wrote Gospel of John, is believed. And he's been exiled to an island called Patmos, which is in the Mediterranean Sea between Greece and Turkey, a little closer to Turkey. And this is in the 90s AD, in about 60 years after Christ ascended. So it's about this time. It's during the reign of the Emperor Diocletian, who was one of the Roman emperors who really upped the persecution against the Christians in the early church. So some of the background of this verse before we get to chapter 3. In chapter 1, verse 10, it says that John was, during the Lord's day, was worshiping in the Spirit, and all of a sudden he hears a voice, and from that point on he sees heaven, he sees future events, and he hears from Christ, and he records those very words. The first things that Christ talks about in the book of Revelation when he's speaking is messages to the churches, to his churches that existed at the time. So Revelation 1 kind of sets that up. Revelation 2, he addresses the first 4 churches. And in chapter 1, verse 12 through 16, before he addresses those churches, to let us know who is speaking, this is what John says he saw. It says, "Then I turned to see the voice that spoke to me. And having turned, I saw 7 lampstands, and in the midst of the 7 lampstands, one like the Son of Man, clothed with a garment down to the feet, and girded about the chest with a golden band. His head and hair were white like wool, as white as snow, his eyes like a flame of fire. His feet were like fine brass, as if refined in a furnace, and his voice is the sound of many waters. He had in his right hand 7 stars. Out of his mouth went a sharp 2-edged sword, and his countenance was like the sun shining in its strength." So that's Jesus. That's what John sees. That's the one who is speaking now. Verses 17 through 20 of chapter 1, Jesus speaks and tells us what it is that he has to say. And the verses say, "And when I saw him, I fell at his feet as if dead. But he laid his right hand on me, saying to me, 'Do not be afraid. I am the first and the last,'" and your verses may say Alpha and Omega. "I am he who lives and was dead, but behold, I am alive forevermore. Amen. And I have the keys of Hades and of death. Write the things which you have seen, and the things which are, and the things which will take place after this. The mystery of the 7 stars you saw in my right hand, and the 7 golden lampstands. The 7 stars are the angels of the 7 churches, and the 7 lampstands which you saw are the 7 churches." So you could really go into and do an entire study on just those 3 verses themselves, but we're just using it again to set up where we are here. In chapter 2, he speaks to the churches of Ephesus, Smyrna, Pergamum, and Thyatira. Interestingly enough, all 7 of these churches are in modern-day Turkey. And many of them are just ruins at this time. You can actually go there and see the ruins of the towns that were there that are no longer there. But the entire church at one point was centered upon a country which is today overwhelmingly Muslim. Just an interesting thing to keep in mind for historical purposes. So the first 4 churches he talks to, again, Ephesus, Smyrna, Pergamum, Thyatira, you may be familiar. He talks to them. He says, "Guys, this is the good, the bad, and the ugly. I know everything you're doing. These are the good things. These are the bad things. This is what you need to do better. And these are the reasons you need to repent." each one of those can be a study unto themselves, but again, we're just going to set that up for what we're going to talk about this morning. So in chapter 3, he addresses 3 churches, the church of Sardis, Philadelphia, and Laodicea. So the first one we come to in chapter 3 is the church at Sardis. So to start that, follow along with me as I read the first 6 verses of chapter 3. And to the angel of the church in Sardis write, these things say he who has the 7 spirits of God and the 7 stars. I know your works, that you have a name, that you are alive, that you are dead. Be watchful and strengthen the things which remain, that are ready to die, for I have not found your works perfect before God. Remember therefore how you have received what you have received and heard, hold fast and repent. Therefore if you will not watch, I will come upon you as a thief, and you will not know what hour I will come upon you. You have a few names even in Sardis who have not defiled their garments, and they shall walk with me in white, for they are worthy. He who overcomes or is victorious shall be clothed in white garments, and I will not blot out his name from the book of life, but I will confess his name before my Father and before his angels. He who has an ear, let him hear what the Spirit says to the churches. Again, the church of Sardis. The city of Sardis was noted for being a city of luxury, easy living. It was on a main trading route. People there were known for just having kind of a soft lifestyle, if you will. Geographically, it's really interesting. The city is surrounded by steep cliffs on all sides. It's virtually impregnable to look at. And so, looking at it, it would seem like this city in warfare could not be captured. But an interesting historical note is that it actually was captured twice, by the Persians and by the Greeks at 2 different times. And here's how it happened. Looking at the walls, or looking at the cliffs surrounding the city, it looks like there's no way you can get to them. So the Persian king offered his men 100 golden, I forget the exact currency. He offered him a pot of money to anyone who could find a way to get into the city. So a couple of them camped out there, they hid out and they watched, and they finally saw a soldier from Sardis come down to near where the cliffs were, and he dropped his spear or his shield or his helmet or something accidentally. So they watched him, and they saw that he took this kind of hidden secret stairway pathway down from the cliffs to get the things that he dropped, and he came back up. And then they realized, okay, there is a way up these cliffs. The people in the city were so confident that nobody could ever get up those cliffs, nobody could find that passageway up them, that they had no one watching the city walls. They had no one guarding, no one watching out. So when this small group of enemy soldiers came up this secret passage, they found the city completely unguarded because the people said, nobody can ever get to us here. And that happened not once, but twice in their history. Interesting thing to keep in mind. That image will come up a little bit. Okay, so that's something about the city of Sardis. In verse 1, it says, and to the angel of the church. Angel probably means pastor, not to say we're angelic. That's not really the image I want you to get there. It just means to represent the person who's in charge of that particular group of believers. So he's the leader of that flock. So the first thing Jesus says to all of these churches, each time he speaks to them after saying, and to the angel of the church of whatever, he gives them some identity of himself to let them know who's speaking. He does that differently for each one, and each one has a slightly different meaning and understanding as you see it. And so in this case, he says, these things says he who has the 7 spirits of God and the 7 stars. The number 7 in biblical symbolism comes to represent completeness, wholeness, and fullness. How many times am I supposed to forgive my brother? 7 times? So Peter was like, he thought that was a pretty good standard, right? And Jesus said, no, 70 times 7 times. So you never stop forgiving. And the point at which you think you can stop believing him or stop forgiving him, you go 70 times more than that. 7 is a number of completeness. So when he says that he has the 7-fold Spirit of God, he is completely Spirit-filled. He is completely filled with God's Spirit into the Spirit. It says he has the 7 stars. That means the churches, they're his completely. He has them all. Every group of believers, every church is his. So he has full authority to speak to them. And this is what he says. I know your works, that you have a reputation for being alive, but you're dead. Notice he didn't say, I know your words, your thoughts, your intentions. He says, I know your works, what you've done. He certainly knows our words and our thoughts and our intentions at all times. He's focusing on what you've actually done for me, what you've accomplished. And the Greek words they use here for alive and dead are interesting. They both have a literal and a figurative definition. He says you have a reputation for being alive. That means life, literally, to have a pulse. But it also means to have full life, vigorous life. It's where we get the root for the word lively. In other words, you're not just alive and sitting here and breathing, but you're moving around, you're vigorous, you're active, you're lively. He says that's your reputation. And this is actually the same word that Jesus uses in John chapter 6, the earlier time, speaking about himself when he says, this is the bread which came down from heaven. Not as your fathers ate the manna and are dead. He who eats this bread will live forever. That manner of living, that manner of life is what he's speaking to here amongst this group of believers. So it means to be alive and to truly live. This is their reputation. But he knows better. Because he doesn't judge as the world judges, but with true judgments, he also says in the Gospel of John. He sees his church for what it is truly, and that is dead. At the same time, the Greek word for dead means literally and figuratively dead. It could mean a corpse, something completely lifeless, without use of life. Now, have you ever been wrong about something before? You don't all have to put your hands up. But let's just admit we've all been wrong about something before. Not just wrong in the sense that we didn't have all the information, but misjudged. You know, we made a judgment that turned out to be incorrect. Have you ever been so wrong as to think you're alive, but you're actually dead? That's probably about the pinnacle of being wrong, right? It's hard to get more off track than that. That's the reputation of this church and what the people saw themselves as alive. But truly, they are dead. Now, from Christ's perspective, that dead means useless in his purpose. You ask yourself, going back to the analogy of the soldiers guarding the city, and they were so lax about their discipline, so reliant upon the natural advantages that they had, that they didn't even bother to keep guard there. Well, what good is a soldier like that to his king? He's not doing anything. He may as well be dead. A dead soldier is no threat to an enemy. A dead soldier is no good to a king. A dead servant is no good to a king. And that is what this church had become, spiritually dead, without use. So in verse 2, he says, be watchful. And some translations might actually say, wake up, which is a good way of putting it as well. This harkens back to that history of you have all these natural advantages, you have luxury and wealth, but you're relying on them. You're putting all your strength and your focus and faith in these natural things, and you're not even keeping watch over your very city. So watch out. Otherwise, I will come to you like a thief in the night. And he says after this, I have not found your works perfect before God. So the idea here is that they are working. They are doing things. They're not completely listless. But they don't measure up to God's standard. Being perfect in God's eyes isn't about exactly what you do. It's about how you do it, why you do it. It has to be done in the Spirit to please God. You can imagine a very worldly, rich, comfortable resident of Sardis making his 10% tithe and offering in the same way that you could the Pharisee in contrast with the widow's mite. But the widow's mite is Jesus' example. That was the work that he considered perfect before God. It is how and why you do what you do. Paul says in 1 Corinthians, before he talks about love, he says no matter what we do, even if we go to the stake to be burned as a martyr, if we don't have love, we've accomplished nothing. It's the spirit behind the works that we do that means something. And he found their works hollow and ineffective. So what to do? In verse 3, he says, remember therefore how you have received and heard. Hold fast and repent. If you will not watch, I will come upon you as a thief, Go back to when you first became a believer, when you were first saved. You understood the great mercy of God, the Father, Christ the Son. Filled with His Spirit, His Word was in your mind and heart. You would never take for granted anything, particularly not your own city. Saying to go stand by those city walls and watch them. Don't rely on all these worldly things that you are hung up on that are keeping you from being effective. Go back to the beginning as a believer and remember what it was like and repent, for He will come upon you as a thief. Now the news isn't bad for everybody in Sardis. He says in verse 5 that some had remained holy through it all, and they were promised a reward. Well, in verse 4, and then leading into verse 5, he says, you have a few names even in Sardis who have not defiled their garments. They shall walk with me in white, for they are worthy. And in verse 5, he who overcomes shall be clothed in white garments, and I will not blot out his name from the book of life. But I will confess his name before my Father and before his angels. Going back to the time of Adam, after the fall of man, nakedness became shameful. It became representative of sin. As soon as man was aware that he was naked, he had to begin clothing his body. So from that time, nakedness has come to represent this sin, and we've had to put some garment over it to cover ourselves. Now for man, it involved actually killing an animal, taking that animal, killing it, and creating that garment. The garment Jesus speaks of here, it says is white, meaning sin will be completely covered. Everything will be completely forgiven. And it's white and it's pure and it's set apart because He gives it to us. Notice He says, He doesn't say you'll find it or you'll make one that will be perfect. He says, I will give him who is worthy, who is victorious, a garment of white to wear, and he will walk with me. Now the last part of verse 5 is interesting. And I'll just read it again. It says, he who overcomes shall be clothed in white garments, and I will not blot out his name from the book of life, but I will confess his name before my Father and before his angels. This is one of those verses a lot of people argue about. There's an intramural game going on within the church about whether people are eternally saved or people can lose their salvation. It's part of the Armenian Calvinistic split. And this is one of those verses that people get really kind of hung up on. Because he says, I will not blot out his name from the book of life. That seems to imply that the people who don't come through victorious, the ones who don't soil their garments, he won't do that, but the ones that do, that he could or would. Some people take this as evidence. You can lose your salvation. I don't happen to believe that that is the case. I don't think that's what it's speaking to. I think the implication here is more based upon speaking to the people who are doing well. He's saying he would never do that. He would never remove from them that citizenship in the book of life. He's not explicitly threatening the people who may have backslidden or who are in the church but haven't yet repented. He's not saying, I will blot out your name. He's just telling the people who haven't backslidden that he won't blot out theirs. So people can disagree about that. There's a reasonable basis for understanding that. In any case, I don't think that what he intends to say there is that the moment you sin, you've lost your salvation. I don't think that's what the case is. But again, that's something that people can disagree about reasonably. And finally, in verse 6, it says, he who has an ear, let him hear what the Spirit says to the churches. And he says this at the end of every letter. In other words, listen. If you can listen, if you can perceive, pay attention. This is important. Now, all of these churches existed in history. They existed at this time. As I said, in Turkey, the time that this was written, it was before the year 100. And the primary purpose of them is speaking to that church at that time. Lessons that we can derive from it in our modern time are certainly there, but the primary purpose is speaking to those believers at that place and at that time. But a lot of people have noted that there seems to be a very distinct pattern and a matching between each of these churches in times in history leading up to our modern time. So just as an example, you can look this up on your own, but a lot of people have seen in that in that church of Ephesus, the very early church, the one that existed from the time that Christ arose to heaven up to about this point in time, the church of the apostles, the church of Acts. And then the next church that is mentioned chronologically is the church of Smyrna, one of only 2 churches that received no rebuke from Jesus in these 7 letters. And people see in this church, the church that existed from the time of Revelation up to about the year 313. This was a church that was under tremendous persecution. Through times when Roman emperors declared themselves gods, and Christians were fed to lions and made to fight in the gladiator rings, and the church was persecuted very strongly in the world. This was the persecuted church. Church at Pergamum from 313 to 500. This is when Christianity became state-run religion. It was adopted by the Roman Empire. Kings were converted. It became part of political power as much as part of spiritual power. And the true church, the church as it was, started to decline. The church at Thyatira from the 500s to 1500s, this was the rise of the Catholic Church, the worldly powers of the popes, political powers of Rome, corrupt beliefs, false idols, corrupt priesthood, many, many problems with that church. The first church that we talked about, the one that we just discussed, Church of Sardis, people see in this that Reformation church that started around the 1500s and led up to the 1700s. This church started by the ideas of men like Luther, who reformed what was a corrupt church and breathed life into it, brought Reformation, brought truth back into the church. So as we go on, I think you'll see some of these parallels as we go forward. So in the interest of keeping this moving along, let's go ahead and look at the next church, the Church of Philadelphia. This is in verses 7 through 13, so follow along with me as we read. And to the angel of the church in Philadelphia write, these things says he who is holy, he who is true, he who has the key of David, he who opens and no one shuts, and shuts and no one opens. I know your works. See, I have set before you an open door, and no one can shut it. For you have a little strength, have kept my word, and have not denied my name. Indeed, I will make those of the synagogue of Satan, who say they are Jews and are not, but lie. Indeed, I will make them come and worship before your feet, and to know that I have loved you. Because you have kept my command and persevere, I also will keep you from the hour of trial which shall come upon the whole world, to test those who dwell on the earth. Behold, I am coming quickly, for I come quickly. Hold fast what you have, that no one may take your crown. He who overcomes, I will make him a pillar in the temple of my God. He shall go out no more. I will write on him the name of my God and the name of the city of my God, the New Jerusalem, which comes down out of heaven from my God. And I will write on him my new name. He who has an ear, let the Spirit hear. Let him hear what the Spirit says to the churches. Excuse me. So Philadelphia, it's not Philadelphia, PA, but the church at Philadelphia was actually, well, the city of Philadelphia was planted as a Greek colony, and the purposes of that were to establish a Greek-speaking city in the middle of Turkey where Greek or Hellenistic civilization could be spread. A lot of you probably know, doubtless you've heard Pastor Brian talk about the different words in Greek for love. The word phileo, which is what Philadelphia is made from. The word phileo speaks of brotherly love, hence the city of brotherly love. We'll talk about that again a little bit later. So this is the Church of Brotherly Love, and as I mentioned, I think previously, Philadelphia and Smyrna were the only 2 churches out of 7 that were not rebuked, were not told to repent, that apparently everything was going well. Nothing specifically was called out against them. So like he did to the church of Smyrna, he addresses himself by identifying who he is. He tells the church that he who is speaking is holy and true. That's his full identity, who he is. He's set apart, pure, genuine. And he says he carries the key of David that allows him to open doors that no one can close doors that no one can open. Now, to give a little more insight on on the significance of carrying this key, just listen to this passage from Isaiah chapter 22. It's verses 20 through 22. You don't have to turn. But Isaiah is speaking, and it says, "Then it shall be in that day that I will call my servant Eliakim, the son of Hilkiah. I will clothe him with your robe, strengthen him with your belt. I will commit your responsibility to his hand. He shall be a father to the inhabitants of Jerusalem and to the house of Judah. The key of the house of David I will lay on his shoulder. So he shall open, and no one shall shut. He shall shut, and no one shall open. I will fasten him as a peg in a secure place. He will become a glorious throne to his father's house." So Isaiah is actually speaking, well, the Lord is speaking through Isaiah there to a wicked servant who would be replaced, named Shebna. He's saying, "I'm going to replace you with my servant Eliakim." So again, this verse speaks of that same authority of the key of David that Jesus speaks to here, speaking of his authority. Now it mentions the key over the shoulder. Keys we carry this more today are a little bit smaller. It's hard to imagine it being over your shoulder. But in this day, an official, an important official, someone who had authority, his right-hand man, if he gave him his key, keys in those days were big, and they had to be carried on the shoulder. And part of the reason they carried them on their shoulders so everyone could see. And if they saw the man who had the key, they knew he had all the authority of his master, the one who had given him. He had the authority of government. He had the authority of everything that his master had authority over. He had given it to this servant. Now we see this in other places in Scripture, giving us this idea that Jesus has received this same authority from his Father. Real famous one, Isaiah chapter 9, verse 6. "For unto us a child is born, to us a son is given, and the government will be upon his shoulders." Matthew 19:19. He says, "I will give you the keys of the kingdom of heaven. This is Jesus speaking to Peter. "I'll give you the keys of the kingdom of heaven. Whatever you bind on earth shall have been bound in heaven. Whatever you loose on earth shall be loosed in heaven." So it's great authority that he's speaking with here. He's saying, I'm carrying the keys of the house of David, of God. That's my authority that I'm declaring to you. Just like the church of Sardis, he says, "I know your works. He said, I have set before you an open door that no one can shut, for you have a little strength. You've kept my word and not denied my name." So just like the church, he knows their works, but in contrast, he finds nothing wrong to say with them. Now, it's generally thought that this open door that he speaks of was specifically, in the manner of this church, related to evangelism. There were some uncivilized, unknown, kind of wild tribes living not too far to the north of this area that had never been reached. And so most people tend to think that this open door specifically is saying, I've put you here, you've kept my word, you've not denied me, I've opened this door for you, it's for you to go through. Nobody can stop you from going through it, nobody can shut it. So it's an opportunity for evangelism, is generally what is thought that open door represents. So this is this church, again, named after the city of Philadelphia. You can think of it as this a brotherly love type church. That's the idea that is conveyed here. A church where everybody is a brother. Is anybody here a brother or have a brother? I happen not to. Several people. I have a sister, and I can assume it's kind of similar. And when I look back on growing up, one thing I can say is most everything that happened to me happened to her. We were together. Whatever we were going through, we were always at the same place. We shared life together. We shared everything together. We were part of each other's lives. So I think this church, that image is of people who are close. They share that brotherly love. They see each other. Those hugs and those handshakes are genuine. And the cares and the prayers for each other are genuine. And it's their genuine desire to be like a brother to the person sitting next to them. What are you going through? What are your problems? What can I pray for you for? I will go through them with you. I will support you through them. It's that type of brotherhood, that brotherly love that I think this church is speaking of. It's that kind of church. Now in verse 8, again after he has said that you've not denied my name, you've remained true and kept my word. He gives them quite a bit of praise. Notice what he gives them praise for. He's not saying, you have built 100,000 seat churches. You have collected millions of dollars in tithes and offerings. You have conquered whole nations. You have subjugated whole peoples and brought them into the church. He says, no, listen, you kept my word and you didn't deny my name, and that's pretty good. He doesn't ask us to fight these great battles for him. He doesn't ask us to conquer these great giants. He says, keep my word, don't deny my name. If you're doing that, you're getting an A+ type report here, an A+ type job review. Everybody else, they may have had more money, more power, they may have had more church programs or more committees, but they all also got rebuked for the things that they were doing. Start with keeping my word and not denying my name. That strength is enough, and he can supply all that is left. Again, I talked earlier a little bit about how people see in these different churches parallels toward more modern history. How people see in the church at Sardis that Reformation church, that church that started strong, that reformed from Roman Catholicism and came back to salvation by faith and belief in God's word. But not long after that, through history, many of those same churches became formalistic and basically Catholic in all but name only. Chuck Smith referred to this church, the Sardis church, as dead Protestantism. They started out in a strong way, in injecting truth, but pretty soon they succumbed to the same kind of things that bothered the church at Thyatira. This formalism, this mundane ritualism, and religious tasks being performed lifelessly and soullessly. That's what the church at Sardis had become. People see in this church at Philadelphia, in this brotherly love church, the type of church that you would see in the 1700s and 1800s, where you saw the modern evangelistic movement come from, where you saw a lot of the more modern denominations really get their start, Baptists and Methodists and such. And you saw this great impetus on missions, on evangelism. This is where you saw the gospel go to Asia, the gospel go to India, the gospel go to Africa, to China. It was sent to all these places. Another reason why people tie evangelism in so closely to that church is they see that each of these churches, we see that church at that time had this evangelistic opportunity before in Turkey. And so the church in the 1700s had a great evangelistic opportunity as well that was given to them. Now in verse 9, where it says, I will make those of the synagogue of Satan who say they are Jews and are not, but lie. Indeed, I will make them come and worship before your feet to know that I love you. So many people draw from this the idea that all the believers in Philadelphia initially were Jews. They were Jews who worshiped in the synagogue. They now worshiped Jesus as the Messiah. They were Messianic. They continued to worship as Jews in the synagogue, which is perfectly correct, exactly what they should be doing. But some of the leaders of the synagogue expelled them for not being true Jews in the fact that they worshiped the Messiah as well. And drawing a little bit upon, again, this is just a historical, some historical parallels. They're not exactly biblical, but it's an interesting thing to think about. The people who first came to this country, the Pilgrims and the Puritans, they were reacting to that same kind of dead Protestantism and formalism in the early 1600s. They wanted to worship freely. They didn't believe in the power that was vested politically in the Archbishop of Canterbury and the Church of England and places like this. They were rebelling against those things and pushing away from them. And I see in that a slight parallel here to the way these these Jews became Messianic followers and encountered that same kind of resistance within the places where they worshipped. The Pilgrims who came to this country, they were chased out of England because they were not worshiping in accordance with the way the state church asked them to worship. They left that country and went to Holland before they eventually came here. So there's a slight parallel in that, in God's Spirit moving and kind of foreshadowing what this brotherly love church would become. It's kind of born out of persecution and I guess a reaction toward what they are doing as opposed to what they had been a part of before, which is formal Judaism. At the same time, we should be careful. This is another one of those verses that some people will interpret and say, this validates replacement theology, saying that the church has replaced Israel in God's plan. It's not what we believe here as a church. I don't think it's what is accepted or what is suggested. I think it's about a specific group of people at a specific time. So I warn you from falling into that. Verse 10, he talks about one of their rewards. He says, because you have kept my command to persevere, I also will keep you from the hour of trial, which shall come upon the whole world, to test those who dwell on the earth. Another area where people disagree about exactly what this means, and there's differences of opinion within the church itself. I know I speak for our church when I say it's our opinion that what he's saying here is a foreshadowing of the rapture of the church that will come at the beginning of the tribulation. That by saying, I will protect you from that time, that means the church will no longer be on earth. Some don't see it that way. Some say, well, the church will be on earth, but they will be protected from that time somehow. And again, that's just something that divides people in different places in different ways. But I will say here, we believe that this speaks to the rapture of the church, that the faithful church will no longer be on earth for the continuation of the tribulation. And this church at Philadelphia, if we want to think of it in modern times, this is the faithful end times church. This is the church that is faithful and true to what God would have them be even in end times. And if you read a little bit further in Revelation, as I know many of you have, you can see what a blessing it will be not to be on earth during that tribulation period and when those things occur. Okay, so he says, I will keep you from that time when the whole earth is tested. Verse 11, behold, I am coming quickly. Quickly doesn't mean soon. It doesn't mean tomorrow. It means when I come, it will be like that. That's the idea that he's giving there. It will be sudden, not in a specific timely manner, but it will be all of a sudden he will come. He will be here quickly. Verse 12, he says, he who overcomes, some of your translations may say, he who is victorious, I will make him a pillar in the temple of my God. He shall go out no more. I will write on him the name of my God and the name of the city of my God, the New Jerusalem, which comes down from the heaven of my God. I will write on him my new name. Another interesting historical note here. This is a highly seismic area, the Mediterranean. And this city of Philadelphia, as it was planted as a Greek city, was full of Greek temples initially. And you can imagine what the Greek architecture looked like with the stone, with the columns, I should say, with the pillars. And so there would often be earthquakes during this time. And so many times, and you can see many of these ruins are there today. I looked them up online. You can actually see them. There would be an earthquake and buildings would be destroyed, but the pillars of these temples always would stand up, even after an earthquake. The whole rest of the building may have shaken, but the pillars would stay there. Another good parallel is the pillar helps hold up the building. It's that foundation. And these people would be the foundation of this church that Jesus is talking about, the ones who persevere to the end. When it says, he shall go out no more, when these earthquakes would happen, a lot of the citizens of Philadelphia would actually leave the city. They'd flee out to the open country to escape damage from falling infrastructure. After an earthquake, when they came back, they would not come back until the city was quiet again. And so he's saying, you are pillars in that time, even when the earthquakes come, even when those things happen, you won't have to leave. You won't have to escape. You won't have to go anywhere. Because I will write on him the name of my God. I will write on him my new name. So the person who overcomes, the believer in this Philadelphian church, receives upon him Jesus' new name. It's a mark of intimacy, of saying, this person is mine. I'm putting my name on him. He belongs to me. It's an identification. In the same way, in this ancient world, the pillars of these buildings, which are considered so essential, sometimes a special inscribed pillar would be added to a temple or to a building to honor a faithful city servant or a distinguished priest. And it says, Barclay in his study said that Philadelphia honored its illustrious sons by putting their names on the pillars of its temple, so that all who came to worship might see and remember. So again, he's speaking to an idea that they would be very familiar with. I will give you this name, you're like pillars. You can think of this as we're those special servants that will remain throughout any earthquake, and the names that is given to us will be put upon this pillar and will be honored. So again, that's speaking of this church in Philadelphia. I think one particular story from church history really kind of symbolizes and describes everything about this church in Philadelphia. Many of you might know it. I'll tell it to you quickly. It's about the Reverend E.P. Scott. He was a missionary, lived in India during the 1800s, again during this same time period where the church's mission was to go out, take the gospel, and spread it evangelistically. Living in India in the 1800s, prompting of the Holy Spirit, but against the advice of the people he was staying with, he set out alone to visit a remote village, determined to share the gospel with a dangerous tribe that had never been reached out to, never been seen before. The journey took several days. While he was on his way, it says he was met by a large group of warriors who quickly surrounded him, each one pointing a spear toward his heart. Expecting to die, he made a decision to use his last few breaths to glorify God, hopefully stir something within the hearts of his captors. He took out his violin, which he always carried with him, closed his eyes, and began to sing, or to play and sing, "All hail the power of Jesus' name," in the native language of the warriors to whom he was speaking. After singing the first verse, the second, third, and then beginning the fourth, he realized he was still standing, he was still alive, and all those around him were peaceful and quiet. When he opened his eyes, he saw that every spear was lowered. All of those mighty warriors stood around him, tears in their eyes, ready to listen and to receive. He spent the remainder of the majority of the remainder of his life living with that tribe, sharing the love of God. Fearless, faithful church. Little strength. They don't have high cliffs protecting their city. They don't go into the unknown with a vast army carrying lots of weapons. One man goes with a violin in faith. Little strength, but God blesses what that has and what that provides. Now, in the interest of time, I'm going to go through the church at Laodicea very quickly and just give you some high points before I bring this to a close. Again, we've seen the church at Sardis, a church that was dead. Thought it was alive, but was dead. We've seen the church at Philadelphia, the one that is faithful, the one that has remained true to what he has taught, the one that has a heart for evangelism. Now we're going to see the church at Laodicea. Just follow along as you read the last verses of chapter 3, verses 14 through 22. And to the angel of the church of the Laodiceans write, "These things says the Amen, the faithful and true witness, the beginning of the creation of God. I know your works, that you are neither cold nor hot. I could wish you were cold or hot. So then, because you are lukewarm and neither cold nor hot, I will vomit you out of my mouth. Because you say, I am rich, have become wealthy, and have need of nothing, and do not know that you are wretched, miserable, poor, blind, and naked. I counsel you to buy from me gold refined in the fire, that you may be rich, and white garments that you may be clothed, that the shame of your nakedness may not be revealed, and anoint your eyes with eye salve, that you may see. As many as I love, I rebuke and chasten. Therefore be zealous and repent. Behold, I stand at the door and knock. If anyone hears my voice and opens the door, I will come into him and dine with him, and he with me. To him who overcomes, I will grant to sit with me on my throne, as I also overcame and sat down with my Father on his throne. He who has an ear, let him hear what the Spirit says to the churches." So Laodicea was another large city, important city, wealthy. It had a large Jewish population. Like a lot of the cities in this region, it was a center for idolatry. People worshiped Caesar, they worshiped the Roman gods, they worshiped the Greek gods. That was prevalent in all of these things. An interesting historical note here that Laodicea was fed by a 6-mile-long aqueduct, and it was connected to a hot springs at a city some distance away. Because 6 miles is a long way for water to flow, by the time that hot water would get to the city, it would be lukewarm. So again, this image of, when he says you're neither cold nor hot, he's talking spiritually, but he's using an image that I think they all would have been like, oh, just like the water we drink. It's disgusting, tepid. We get it. Got it. Understood. So that's a good note to what the city was like and to what the church was like. Now he says, I know your works, that you are neither cold nor hot. I could wish you were cold or hot. So then because you are lukewarm, neither cold nor hot, I will vomit you out of my mouth. Jesus isn't interested in middle ground with us and with our lives. As Brian says, you're a saint or you ain't. If you're somewhere in between, you're not. Interestingly enough, though, if you're really not, it's easy to understand where you are and how to reach you, where your mind is. But if you're floating around in between, that's really difficult to read. It's difficult to understand, to know where that person is and who he is. God says, look, be on my side or be my enemy. Be on one side or the other, but don't float in the middle. That's worthless to me. I can't get to you where you are there. Be for me or be against me. Make a stand one way or the other. Choose you this day who you will serve. Now in verse 1, another interesting thing that you can see here is he says, to the church of the Laodiceans. Every other letter, he says, to the church in Philadelphia, to the church in Thyatira, the church in Cyrus. Here he says, the church of the Laodiceans or Laodiceans. People would look at that and say, this was a church that was ruled by the people. That's what that name means. This may have been a church run by majority rule, mob rule, instead of run with a true overseer, with someone spiritually called to lead and to minister to that church. This may have been a place where popular opinion is what dominated, where the will of the people, regardless of truth, came to. He says, the church of the Laodiceans rather than the church in Laodicea. So again, similar to the church at Sardis, but a little bit harder edged. He says, you say you are rich, that you become wealthy and need nothing, but you don't seem to know that you are wretched, miserable, poor, blind, and naked. It's a pretty bad place to be. I think I've been all of those things at different times, but I don't think I've been all of those things at one time before. These folks were in a bad place and they didn't even realize it. That's the worst part to it. Now again, just moving forward a little bit, he says, buy from me gold refined in the fire, that you may be rich, white garments that you may be clothed, that the shame of your nakedness may not be revealed, and anoint your eyes with eye salve so that you may see. So he says that you lack all of these things. You have a worldly amount of money. You have a worldly amount of things. You have a worldly amount of wisdom that you think makes you wealthy and knowledgeable and that you can see. But really, you're poor, blind, wretched, naked. You lack all these things. So because of the love of God, the love that he has for us, he doesn't say, well, because that's who you are, I'm casting you off. He doesn't even castigate them any further for being in this condition. He says, look, here's what you need. You think you have it, but you don't. Here's what you need. Come get gold from me. Don't worry about the gold of this world. Come get the gold from me that is refined in the fire, and you'll be rich. Come to me for a white garment that you may be clothed and your nakedness will be covered. Come to me for the eye salve so that you may see, so that you may truly see. As many as I love, I rebuke and chasten. Therefore be zealous and repent. Behold, I stand at the door and knock. If anyone hears my voice, opens the door, I will come into him and dine with him, and he with me. The very worst church that there was arguably was this church right here, the very worst church. His ultimate message is, please come to me so I can give you all the things you really need. Repent, come back to me. Because I love you, I'm chastening you, I'm rebuking you. That's a very popular phrase in my house, by the way, when we're talking to the kids. If I didn't love you, I wouldn't, it's because I love you that I'm doing this. Of course, they don't get it, just like I didn't get it when I was a kid. But it's so true. I can see you, son, for what you really are at this moment. And you need to trust me. You think you know what you have, what you're doing, that you've got what you need, but you need to trust me. And you need to come get these things. This is what you really need. So as hard of a rebuke as this is, it's softened by this fatherly desire to love and to reestablish, to bring about a change, bring them back to where they were, bring them back to being true believers. He says, come to me for all of these things and I will provide them. Don't look to your own riches, resources. They're not going to save you. Turn around and look to me. Lastly, he says, behold, I stand at the door and knock. Anyone hears my voice and opens the door, I will come into him and dine with him, and he with me. Again, our churches are not doing well if Jesus is outside. Number one, if he's outside and not here, that's a problem. Number two, if he's knocking on the door and hasn't been let in, it's an even bigger problem. Number three, you have to ask yourself, how long has he been there? Would it not make sense that one of us would be looking out for him? And that when we saw, if he wasn't here, and we saw him coming, we would have the door open. There would be a place of honor for him. Again, they've gotten it about as wrong as you can get it. You all come here for the purpose of worshiping Jesus. He's outside knocking. Hey, can I come in? Let me in. I can help you here. They just keep going about what they're doing, and he stays there, remaining and knocking. How sad would it be that Jesus would be outside the church? Now, most people would say this church at Laodicea represents the opposite, the inverse of the church of Philadelphia. Philadelphia is that faithful church that will be here during the last days. And Laodicea is the apostate church, the church that would fall away without repentance. So most people would say, in this day and time, right now, using this model, there are Philadelphia churches and Laodicea churches. In this country, anyway. We don't face persecution in this country yet, like people do in other countries. That may change. But I think in this comfortable America that we live in, those are pretty much our two options. Laodicea, Philadelphia, perhaps Sardis. But anyway, that's kind of this world that we live in. Now, I asked you at the beginning, who loves you more than a brother? I think the answer to that question could only be a father or a mother, a parent, a person that raised you. They're the only ones that could love you more. But this brotherly love church in Philadelphia that we read about here, this is God's desire for us, for the church that we have. Now, I would not ask anybody here to say what church you think this is, what model you think our church fits into, because I think any of them could become the other at any time. You could start out great, you could become soft over time, you could become lukewarm as a church as a whole. The only thing I would glean from all of that would be, let's let this be a church of brotherly love. Let's let this be that church where the person next to you, the person you see when you come here, if they have problems, you make them your problems. If you have something on your mind, something on your heart that you need to share, that you need help with, there should be somebody here that you can think of as a brother that you can come to and say, brother or sister, I need something, I need help. And they should say, tell me all about it and let's pray. You think about what the world would look like if every church was filled with people like that, full of encouragement, patience, brotherly love. Let's join together as brothers and sisters in love in that way. So I leave you with that. Each of us, each time we come to worship, each time we come to church in our lives, let's seek to be that brother. Let's be known as that church filled with brotherly love. The church that reaches out, the church that cares about each other, the church that loves each other. I want to encourage you all. Let's all be brothers to each other today and going forward. Let's pray. And Lord, we do just thank you for this time. Father, I thank you that you love us. Lord, that you've given us all things. Lord, that whatever we would view as necessary in this world, we would have to obtain with our own strength. Lord, I thank you that you will give us even better the things that we need truly from you. Lord, I ask that your Spirit would move us this morning, that as brothers and sisters, we would go forward loving you, serving each other with brotherly love. Lord, that we would seek after each other, we would bear each other's burdens, rejoice, weep, as the time would happen. Lord, I thank you that you spoke to your churches, that you love them so much, that you told them the things they did that pleased you, the things they do that don't please you. Lord, that you would even speak to us today about how we would serve you and how we would please you. Father, I pray that as we need it, you would chasten us, Lord, that you would correct us, that you would keep us on track, and always bring us back to the pathway that leads to you. Lord, we love you, we thank you. And again, I pray a spirit of brotherly love over this body today and those who are gathered here this morning. In Jesus' name, amen.
Not forgiven because you were forsaken. I'm expected. You weren't condemned. Now I'm alive and well. Your spirit is within me because you died and rose again. Amazing love, how can it be that you, my King, would die for me? Amazing love, I know it's true. It's my joy to honor you in all I do. I honor you.
Amazing love.
Amazing love, how can it be that you, my King, would die for me? Amazing love, I know it's true. It's my joy to honor you in all I do. I honor you in all I do. I honor you.
God bless you all. Happy Father's Day to all of you out there. Stick around, have some coffee and some fellowship.
If there are any brothers or sisters here that have anything you want to pray about, anything you want to talk about, we'll be right here. Come up and